on this episode of the Photography News podcast, cold snaps, woodland scares and Christmas lights chaos. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Photography News podcast, our 33rd. My name is Roger Payne and I'm the editorial director at Photography News. And in light of the fact that December is just around the corner, I thought I'd introduce my colleagues based on who is most likely to have an advent calendar ready and waiting to open. So without further ado, let me introduce the editor of Photography News, Mr. Will Chung. Hi, Will.
Hi, Rog. Hi, Kingsley. And how wrong you are. I do not have an advent calendar.
Oh, you don't have an advent calendar? I thought you'd be
not.
like a kind of a chocolate advent calendar kind of man, all lined up and ready to go, no?
No, well, having said that, Annie has just shouted out, how do I know whether I've got an advent calendar or not? So maybe I do have an advent calendar.
Yes, and of course, Will, you are joining us from a different location. You are at your partner Annie's house, which has been quite an interesting new look behind you. You've got a different bookshelf behind you, which is nice to see.
It's full of games from the 80s, I think. Computer games from the 80s. So Kingsley will know them very well, but I don't.
Excellent. Well, lovely to have you on board. And welcome also to, well, who I thought was least likely to have an advent calendar lined up and ready to go, contributing editor, Mr. Kingsley Singleton. Hi, Kingsley.
Hello. How are you guys? All right? Yes.
Good, thank you.
I think we're good. Advent calendar? Yes? No?
Yeah. No, I don't like them. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I'm very much a kind of I don't like to use the word pagan because that suggests that organized religion is the correct version of things. But I'm very much in the midwinter festival, the Yule side of things. And I don't know whether the early Britons had some form of advent calendars with rocks and worms in them or something, but at least they probably didn't create all the unnecessary mess and waste of cheap chocolate and other things.
Well, to complete a triumvirate of bar humbug, I also don't have an advent calendar, but hey, maybe, you never know. I've got one coming up. Go on, Kingsley.
I'd just like to point out that this bookshelf that's visible behind Will also doesn't hold any of Will's numerous books.
No, it doesn't.
With Annie being one of his biggest fans, I thought there might be a kind of a selection of signed tomes there, but sadly not.
Please don't give it away. She might get one for her Chrissy stocking. So
you've got 24 of them for an advent calendar all lined up. And soon those shelves will be creaking to the tomes written by Will. I don't think you've written 24 books, have you, Will?
No, I wish I had.
Well, let's kick off the podcast as we normally would, which is a quick discussion about what we've been photographing since we last got together. Actually, because the last podcast we did was based around reader questions, we actually bypassed the what we've been photographing. So it's been a little while since we had a photography chat. So Kingsley, let me come to you first. You've just hot-footed it back from Devon to get in front of a microphone to record this. So presumably your camera's been out and active while you've been down by the sea.
Yeah, no, well, I did actually. I suppose. I mean, I did some shots on the beach of dogs running around, and I did some coastal landscapes. But probably the most novel thing was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, I decided to launch myself out to the local wood or through the local wood which overlooks sort of an estuary, and to do some astro pictures, but hadn't taken my star tracker because I thought, because of Storm Arwen being in town, I thought there'd be no clear skies, but the rule of the astro tracker proved true once again, in that wherever it is, clear skies will be otherwhere.
Okay, so no clear skies.
No, there were clear skies because I didn't have the astro tracker. So
I see. Sorry.
Yes. Here, back up here in Lincolnshire, there probably was like thunderstorms and volcanoes going off and stuff. But like in Devon, it was a clear view right to the galactic centre.
So you went for a long exposure approach, a star trail style approach, did you?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't really do star trails. I don't. This is probably a rant for a different time. I don't really get star trails. I don't like. That's not how people see the world, is it? I understand traffic trails because I think they represent the kind of the futile and aggressive movement of humans. But star trails, I mean, like, it's sort of I don't know. I don't. It's not how you see the world. These are more. These are just stars in the landscape sort of thing. So like starry skies. There was I mean, it was particularly bright. Orion was particularly visible. I mean, as it often is. But one of the things that you find then when you set up for astrophotography is that you always collect more information than you can see with the naked eye. So what I sort of started off thinking, oh, that'd be a great picture of Orion above this sort of estuary, and then obviously what you get is loads more stars. So sometimes you have to dial it back a bit and just pick out the brightest stars, like if that's what you want.
And are you happy with the results, or have you not had a chance to review just yet?
No, I'm not massively happy with them, but that's all part of the journey, isn't it? No, they're okay. They're like technically they're fine. They're just one of the things that I didn't do, which I meant to do, was like earlier in the day I'd walked the same path, and there are a couple of bits where I was going to go back and specifically shoot from that point, but in the middle of the night. And it was a moonless night, so obviously it's even it's darker than usual. It was a bit tricky to find like exactly where I wanted to be. So they're not like compositionally, they're not as not sort of quite where I wanted them. Fabulously frightening as well, walking through a wood at night.
I was going to say that's quite. I would have to admit that's quite brave of you, because that's all a bit too Blair Witch for my liking.
Well, there's yeah. I mean, it's the spec. It's about sort of. I mean, I enjoyed it because it's like you start sort of like fooling yourself into raising your blood pressure a bit, don't you? I mean, like the real danger down there would be the fact that it's actually owned by a load of people that run like a pheasant shooting business, so you're more likely to get shot in the arse with a shotgun than you are attacked by a kind of a ladle swinging witch kind of coming out of the scrub. But it was fun. It was good. It's good to get out and do something unusual.
But Kingsley, you going through wood at night, I would have thought would have been a perfect recipe for you to fall over something or other and break a bit of camera or a bit of a filter or something. But are you telling me you walked through the wood without falling over and any physical mishap?
I can't think of anything that happened. I might have dropped something.
Have you opened your gadget bag since you've been back?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I did notice the other day. I noticed that I was walking around and I had it. It was like half unzipped. It was terrible. But fortunately, nothing had fallen out. But no broken bones, no curses, no shotgun wounds, or anything like that.
Well, just to jump in, I mean, I also have been out in the dark in a wooded area, but in a slightly different sort of situation. In that I paid a visit to a local National Trust property to me, a place called Ickworth House. And I think there's as a number of places are doing at this time of the year, they're sort of illuminating their gardens, and there's like a sort of a prescribed walk that you can wander around the gardens, and it's all beautifully illuminated, trees and shrubs and all this sort of stuff with multicolored lights. And then they lit up part of the house, the rotunda on the part of the house, the side of the house, which looked rather special. So of course I took a camera along with me, but bearing in mind it was a public event and a National Trust property, I decided to leave the tripod at home, and that was probably a fairly important error on my part, because although the lights seemed quite bright, when it came to it, they actually weren't that bright at all. And so what I managed to achieve was a series of fairly shaky, long handheld shutter speed attempts. I got about 2 or 3 images I was happy with, but no more than that.
I'm wondering actually what the kind of like the supposition. So it was National Trust, was it? The supposition is that there would be like a posse of National Trust wardens around stopping people putting tripods down.
Well, indeed, there were a number of ladies and gentlemen in high vis vests, but they were largely, I think, to stop people falling over and making sure they were staying on the right route. But I was pretty sure that if I broke out a tripod, and I think from previous experience that I believe the National Trust do view you as a professional if you own a tripod. But it was good fun. I mean, if you've got one, a lot of properties tend to do these sort of well lit walks in the run up to Christmas. So if there's one local to you, I'd urge you to go along, because it did look rather fabulous. It's just that sadly my pictures didn't replicate it quite so well. So Will, moving on to you. Currently we're 0 for 2 in terms of we've done well on our photographic exploits. So so hopefully you can restore some balance and tell us what you've been up to.
Well, I've been up to lots of things, but just to go back, Roger, to the National Trust, I think we're thinking back to what it was like a few years ago when they were up in arms about photographers and people selling their work. I think they're much more relaxed now, especially the way photography has grown. I mean, going back to the National Trust, I remember that was a time of film, and people like Joe Cornish were going around earning lots of money photographing for the trust. But I think with the tripod, if you're shooting for yourself, I don't think it's an issue. But obviously the bigger issue is that your tripod might trip up one of their guests and they fall over and then sue them. I mean, that's a different issue, but I think legally, I think they're much more relaxed. But in terms of what I've been doing, I had a week off. I went to Wales. I went to mid Wales, and the reason behind that was simply my pier project, which is still ongoing. I wanted to go to Aberystwyth in mid Wales because that was a pier I hadn't yet photographed, or indeed I've never been to Aberystwyth until this time. So I went there. That was the primary reason I went there, but also then we moved up to North Wales and we went to Carnarvon and to Menai, and I wanted to photograph the pier at Bangor, which was okay, which I've got some shots of previously, but they weren't very good, and also Beaumaris pier, but the weather intervened. So, I mean, Aberystwyth was okay. I didn't get any great shots there, but I got something which I can use. Typically Wales, we had lots and lots of rain.
Can I ask about the pier project, insofar as have you shot like the same pier several times, having sort of wanting to revisit something and shoot it differently? Are you doing stuff twice because you didn't like it first time around, is what I'm trying to say? Maybe.
No, I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, the pier project was an idea I had a few years back, and I thought what I wanted to do is photograph every surviving pier as defined by the National Pier Society. I did piers like Felixstowe, which are relatively local to me, so like 80 miles down the road. And I photographed Felixstowe, and then I heard through the National Pier Society newsletter that they had a revamp. So I ended up going there again. And of course, I have been to various places where the weather conditions weren't right at the time. So yes, I will have to go back. And also I've noticed on the pier site recently is that some piers have appeared on there which weren't on there previously.
You mean, hang on, are you suggesting that piers are being built?
Well, indeed, some are being renovated, and of course some have been destroyed by the weather. So, for instance, Colwyn Bay was on the National Piers website, but it's no longer on the National Piers website. And the one that has appeared is the one at Weston-super-Mare, Revo, I think it's called. Right. So there are some piers which I want to go back to, but I've mostly covered them now. I've done 51 out of 61, believe it or not. So the ones that are outstanding are like in Scotland.
Rog, do you fancy? We should put him on mute for a minute. Do you fancy a little gamble on this?
What, on whether he'll finish it?
Or maybe when it might be, like, so 2023, 2024.
So where are the outstanding 10?
3 in Scotland, 2 in the northeast of England, 1 on the Isle of Man, and I think there's some others which I want to repeat, like Southampton is being renovated and the shots I got weren't very good. Burnham on Sea, my shots weren't very good. The Sutphill I mentioned, one at Weston-super-Mare is not very good. So they still tend to go, but it could be like painting the Forth Road Bridge, to be honest. It's that sort of project.
I'm tempted to feel that that's exactly that. I don't think you're going to complete that, Will. It's not that I'm down on you in any way. You've done tremendously well to get to 51, but I can't see you completing that. But hey, if you do, maybe we could. If you did complete it, what I'd like to see you do is then make a set of top trumps out of it, so that you can have your image and all the facts about the piers. That'd be quite fun. What is the longest pier that you've photographed so far?
Longest pier must be Southend, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's a terrific pier. There's a train on there as well, of course, so you can jump with the train and get to the end.
And can I just ask one more pier-related question, which is there a minimum length that a pier needs to be in order to become a pier?
I don't, to be honest, I don't know how the National Pier Society define it, because some of them are quite random. And some piers I've been to are very, very short, and some of them are derelict. They're not very, very nice at all. But, for instance, if you go to, I think it's Weymouth Bandstand Pier, that's quite short. In fact, you can't there's no pier to actually stand on because it's an Italian pizza restaurant.
Right.
So it's like, and if you go to the Halfpenny Pier at Harwich, I mean that's not much of a pier. So there are some piers which are definitely more enjoyable to photograph than others.
Right.
But that's part of the fun. It's quite the fun of turning up at a new location and having to deal with stuff. You know, I do a little bit of research, but I don't deal with that much, and just turning up with the conditions and having to deal with it. But the thing is about Wales, though, Roger, as I said, I mean, the piers was okay, but actually I had most fun in a couple of places where we went and photographed butterflies, because the rain was the weather was so horrible. We just went inside. So there's a butterfly farm near Aberystwyth we went to, and that was rather fun. We spent I don't know 3 or 4 hours in there, in the nice warm cozy feeling of a greenhouse, photographing exotic species, and I really enjoyed that actually. Despite myself.
I've done that myself. It is quite fun, isn't it? And they do tend to settle and stay in one place for a while, which is quite handy, really.
Yeah, I mean, this place we went to in Aberystwyth, they were encouraging us to pick the things up. I mean, not grab by the wings or anything, but you know, if you hold your hand out, they would move onto your hand. And it was just, I mean, photographically, it was difficult because the color temperature was difficult and the light conditions were difficult. But it was just fun,
And that's what it's all about. Excellent. Well, that's good news. So at least somebody got something worthwhile out of their photographic exploits, which is great. So just before we move on, Will, why don't you also just dive in and tell us about the latest issue? We are recording on the 29th of November, and I believe that an issue has just become available, or it is at least available online, if not in stores as yet.
That's right. Well, it's our double issue, which is the one which actually makes up for the fact there is no issue in December itself. So in it, we've got the encouragement for our readers to vote for the PN Awards again, which is voting for the best kits and best services in the country. So that's been running for a couple of months, but you know, we got until I think it's January the 5th, 2022 to place your vote. So please go online and register your vote. We've also got a Christmas winners buyer's guide, which is basically lots of photographic present ideas for our readers. And also I've been testing in there the Fujifilm GFX50S Mark II, which is a medium format camera, which of course sounds hideously expensive, but remarkably this one isn't. You can buy it with the new standard zoom, the 35-70, for £3,800, and that's remarkable for a medium format camera. But that's a big test, and that's in the issue too. And yeah, I have to say I really enjoy using it.
So impressions of that are that it's a bit of a bargain, Will? I mean, £3,800, it's difficult to call that a bargain, I guess, but image quality wise, I presume if it's like the other stuff that Fujifilm have produced, it'll be up there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's difficult to use the word bargain because in these cash-strapped times, when we're sort of urge of dipping maybe into another lockdown with the pandemic, it's difficult to say a camera is great value, but that is £3,800. And indeed, something else I tested in the issue, which I would also say is great value, but again, it's a lot of money, and that's the new Canon RF 100 to 500mm zoom lens. And that is selling for around £3,300, I think, which is again a hell of a lot of money, but it's hell of a lens. I was really impressed by it.
Excellent. Well, so special double issue out now. The best you can either pick that up in store, or the other option is to go online to photographynews.co.uk, where you'll be able to read the magazine digitally. All you have to do is give us your email address and we'll give you an entire magazine for nothing. While we're also talking about all things digital, we also have Photography News on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and the handle for all three of those is @PhotoNewsPN. It's worth me just mentioning our previous chat about advent calendars. We have put together a Photography News podcast advent calendar, which will be appearing primarily on Instagram. So every day for the next 24 days, or 25 days even, starting on December the 1st, we will have we're going back and looking back at old episodes of the Photography News podcast for you to open and enjoy. So if you fancy taking a retrospective listen to some of the stuff that we've rambled on about in the past, then make sure you follow our Instagram feed, which once again is @PhotoNewsPN. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about the weather, because inspired by the fact that I'm currently living in a house that's got no heating, and also I went for a walk today hoping to warm up a little bit and found it was absolutely freezing outside. I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about taking images in cold weather. We've covered off bad weather before, but not specifically cold weather. Obviously, as Will's already alluded to, we've had Storm Arwen storm across the country and leave a load of snow, ice, frost across and in its wake. So Kingsley, I'm going to come to you first, because I've noticed on your Instagram feed in the past that you have been out and about with your camera when the snow has fallen. So let's talk about snow first. What is your plan then? So do you wait until you just open the curtains and it's like, hey, there's snow? Or would you check the weather forecast beforehand and then plan to go out the following day?
Well, first, thanks for coming to my Instagram page.
Yeah, I followed and then unfollowed.
Yeah, thanks very much for that too. I would say that I'm probably always a bit more reactive to those things rather than planning. But I think that when confronted with snowfall, you have to act quite quickly, especially if you're a bit of a kind of a fascist in terms of it. Like I hate it when it's all cut up, so I want to be down there before everyone else has tramped through it and messed everything up. Even though, I mean, to be honest, I would be fully admitting of the fact that I've done some sort of judicious kind of cloning and healing on occasion to sort of like pretty up like a sort of a perfect snowfield. Little bit. I'm not talking about like the paintbrush tool set to 100% white and just painting all over the foreground, but like just a little bit of smartening up, So yeah, I mean, I would say, obviously the optimum for that is overnight snowfall and making sure you're up for the dawn, before too many people kind of start making snowballs out of it.
And you obviously live in a small, well, not small town, but a town in Lincolnshire, don't you? So you would head into town rather than out into the fields. Would that be your preferable sort of modus operandi?
Yeah, I think because and also like around a town, you quite often you'll know some of the vantage points that work. But then equally, like in a town, it's even more important to be quite sort of quick in terms of getting to places, because obviously, it doesn't take much for everything to kind of get, sort of turned into slush and stuff. I mean, yeah, local kind of farm, everything around here is farmland. Really, I mean, there are some woods and stuff. I mean, again, I know we spoke, didn't we, about woods, I think last time or the time before, but woods are great for snow. Particularly kind of, for not only for kind of like broader landscapes, but for details and things. And it's one of those things that I think we were talking about, the difficulties of shooting in woodland. When you have snow in woodland, actually a lot of those difficulties go away because there's so much light bouncing around that it's kind of, exposures are sort of a little bit easier, as long as you sort of take advantage of those usual tips about overexposing slightly for snow to make sure everything's white and doesn't kind of turn grey.
So overexposing slightly by what, to what extent? Does it depend on whether the sun's out or not?
That does make, I mean, direct sun on snow does make it tricky. It's similar to regular landscapes insofar as you're looking for to try and even out the contrast as much as possible. So particularly if you've got broken sun on snow, sort of areas of unlit snow and lit snow, it becomes even more difficult. But I think I mean, with such a reflective subject, it's quite important to compose kind of sensitively for that.
Well, Will, you're nodding along, which means remarkably that you must agree with what Kingsley's saying, which makes a change. But he's speaking sense. He talks the right stuff, does he?
Well, kinda. I mean, I think this overexposure for snow thing is a bit of a hangover from film days, where once you got a shot, you can do much with it. So yeah, when you got backlit sun, +2 stops was quite important, and less so when it was grey and flat overhead. But you get away with murder nowadays with digital. And of course, you've got this thing called a histogram. So, if in doubt, take a shot, check it. And sure, you don't want that highlights to be too veiled, because if you push them hard in processing, they can look a bit horrible. But it's not as difficult as it used to be, put it that way. So you a little bit of exposure won't do any harm, but you know you can pull it back if you're shooting raw. This is not just JPEG, but if you are shooting JPEG only, then hey, just check out the histogram and make sure you, if in a white scene, you've got plenty of light coloured tones to the right hand side of the histogram.
So exposed to the right for light. Basically.
Yeah, because you got white subjects. But I mean, the thing is, we all live on the eastern side of England, so of course we get less snow. And the biggest problem is for me is that you hear about wonderful snow, and of course you can't really jump in a car and head up to the Dales or something when you've got snow going, because you could be one of these irresponsible people caught out in the snowdrift and you get rescued by the AA. But for me, my favourite part of snow is okay, pristine snow is lovely, but I love it when it's falling and you get nice lumps of, nice big snowdrops, snowflakes, and you get out there and you get some, with a slow shutter speed, you get some nice blur perhaps. You get pictures of people struggling with their umbrellas or people pushing, helping out, pushing cars up the hill. So, stuff like that. I think there's some excellent pictures to be had if you're stuck in town and can't get very far and you want some pictures of snow. So the scenic opportunities are one thing, and Kingsley's cover those perfectly well. But I like some of the street photography you can get in snow. But we don't get much snow, and we had, earlier this year where I live in Camborne, we did have some snow in January, but I think that's the first time for some years where we had good snow.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're more likely to get something like ice or frost. So where do the opportunities lie there? Kingsley, you've got your hand up.
Frost is an absolute gift for kind of landscape photography or sort of town photography, whatever, so whether it's like, and you don't even need like that, the kind of the big spiky frost, the hoarfrost, you don't need that. That's fantastic if you get it, and you kind of need to be, I think usually you need to be further out into the country.
Yeah, it
side
has to be damn cold as well for a hoarfrost, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also for for other stuff to stack up as well. I think it has to have been slightly wet as well beforehand, doesn't it? But like just the kind of the fact that everything. Do you know what? It's funny that Will mentioned video games earlier, and there's a modern trait in video games where they kind of use lots of backlighting and kind of put like halos around everything, and that's what Frost does. It like illuminates and kind of defines foreground detail and stuff. So all you need is, whether you're out by the river and you've got rushes or kind of plants, or even if you're in a field and you've got grass, it kind of creates these brilliant kind of, it sort of edges everything, doesn't it? It kind of gives you extra texture. It's brilliant. I love Frost. More Frost, please.
Is it a sort of a bit of a broad generalization to say, but if it snows, then you can go sort of wide, but if it's frosty or icy, then it's actually a good discipline to go close and look for details and look for picking out, bits and bobs?
I wouldn't necessarily force it sort of either way. I think like if you have like a wide angle shot of a, even if you're down in the town park or something and it's frosty, you get sort of sufficiently close to the grass in the foreground or something, you're going to get leaves or whatever. You're going to get that kind of that brilliant kind of detail. But yeah, you're right. It's like if either you've got a kind of a suitable standard zoom where you can go to the long end and shoot a bit closer, or you've got your macro or your telephoto zoom, you can pick out some kind of good details as well.
Excellent. Will, you think you agreeing again?
No, I'm broadly agreeing. I'll go even closer though. I would get into the macro world. I had to defrost a car this morning. If I had time, I would have got the macro lens out, and because the sun was picking out the frost flakes and it was nice and sparkly. Yeah. So there's opportunities for patterns too, and I would get the macro lens and get in a bit closer and have a bit of fun that way.
Now, coming back to you again, Will, I'm expecting, based on previous podcasts that we've recorded, with your boot full of stuff in the car, that you are just as well prepared for wintry weather. So in terms of making sure that you're wrapped up warm, what would you be taking out if you were going to venture out and capture some snowy or frosty images?
Yeah, it is a good point, and my car is fairly well equipped. I've even got an entrenching tool from an Army and Navy store I bought a few years ago, which is really handy, of course, if you get caught in a snowdrift. Right. That's happened yet. But the things I've got in my car, I have got ponchos for bad weather. That's obviously just rain. But I like those hand warmers. That's something I've learned to use. So I've got a couple of packs of hand warmers in the car, and these are those little packs you buy from outdoor shops that you crack open and they give you heat for 8 or 9 hours anyway for some while. So when I'm going out in the cold now, I mean, obviously I do wear gloves. I often have fingerless mitts because I prefer to have my digits on the camera, which of course makes your hand very cold afterwards once you've taken a few shots. But I've got these hand warmers in my pockets, and I have a couple of those active. So if I've gone out, I just stick them in there, and when my hands get cold, I just grab all of these hand warmers and warm them up a bit. So they're my favourite accessories at the moment. I have got some heated gloves somewhere as well, but I need to sort out the batteries and get them working again. But I prefer, like I said, when I'm out shooting, I like to have my fingers actually on the camera or stroke tripod, which has consequences on your fingers, and you do get cold. So those little heating packs you get from outdoor shops, thoroughly recommended.
Excellent. Now, this does remind me of one of my favourite stories that Kingsley told on the podcast before, where he was explaining that I believe he was in Norway and managed to get his tongue stuck to his tripod, if I recall. So presumably, Kingsley, you have learnt that and have now bought either a carbon fibre tripod or some form of tongue warming device for you to go out and use. Is that right?
Yeah, what I mean, incredible thing to pick between this. I don't know whether I should go into this story again, and maybe we should just direct it to people towards it via the advent calendar thing. Yes. In short, if it's -40, don't stick your tongue out anywhere near anything metal.
But what about, Kingsley, in terms of your kit? So obviously Will's covered off the stuff like, hand warmers, fingerless gloves, all very useful. I'm sure, if he hasn't mentioned it, I'm sure it would include, a nice warm jacket and a hat, etc., and warm boots, what have you. What about kit, Kingsley? What can you do to keep your kit cozy and warm, or as cozy and warm as possible?
I think modern cameras, like when you get a new camera or lens come out these days, they always make a point of listing the fact that it can be used down to like -10, like if you're sort of lucky enough to get out in such interesting conditions. I think like there are the usual things about like batteries run down faster in the cold, so like you take spare batteries, keep them in an internal pocket near your body, all that kind of stuff. I like, in terms of using kit, like it's not a problem to take warm stuff out into the cold so much as it is the opposite way around, because that's when you get fogging. But like generally, the one sort of something that springs to mind is to try and be a little bit extra sort of fastidious in your camera bag packing sort of before you go out in the cold, because you don't really want to mess around too much standing around in the cold. Like, so for instance, like if you use an L bracket, make sure it's on the camera first so you don't have to fit it, or find the Allen key to fit it, and that kind of thing. Or make sure that your filter holder is set up with the right kind of stepping ring or whatever, so that you're not, because otherwise it can, you don't want to be kind of hanging around too long, especially if it's really, really cold. But like kind of going back to kind of, I mean, I guess this is where photography overlaps so much with sort of tips that you pick up from kind of hill walkers and hikers and stuff like that, because so much of the pleasure of shooting in those kind of conditions is down to keeping yourself comfortable and like dressing in layers rather than just having some massive kind of puffer jacket on. But also things like, don't like, if you have the sort of bag that supports it, like one of these landscape sort of friendly camera bags that has two sections, has a camera compartment and a top section, put your extra clothing in the top section for when you're walking to a location, because otherwise it's really easy to overheat and get a bit sweaty, and then you get to a cold location, stop, suddenly you're sweaty, and that's really unpleasant. So like there's a Scandinavian tip, which is something about like, when you start a walk, you should be slightly too cold, just a little bit too cold, so that your body warms up as you walk. But if you've got like a body warmer or a puffer jacket, leave that in your bag until you get to the location, and then but also remember your hat. I've never really found gloves that, I mean, it's okay walking around with gloves and stuff, but like I've never really found a set of those those sort of camera specific gloves with fingers that come off and stuff like that. I've never really found a set that were that good.
No, I think I remember going around the photography show a couple of years ago, and there were some people selling winter gloves for photographers, and I did buy obviously I'm a marketing man's dream, so I did buy a pair of these darn gloves, and they are very good. But if you had to say to me right now if I lay my hands on them, I wouldn't have a clue. I'd have to have a rummage. And having spent 80 quid, maybe I should find them again.
There's something else about all weather jackets that like it should be obvious, but a lot of people kind of don't know it necessarily. But like good outdoor jackets often have like different types of pocket. They have like external pockets, which are used mainly for accessories and stuff. But then they have sort of more kind of fleecy lined pockets. So like it's just silly things like that, like using the right pockets. Don't expect your hands to warm up if you're putting them in an external pocket that's only got like a nylon outer or something, because that's not going to help.
Just wanted to say on batteries, do be careful if you are putting them into pockets, because you may have coins and keys in there, and if you've got the contacts showing, then obviously you need to make sure the battery cover's on, or put them in a little bag or box or something, so you don't get the metal contacts visible. But no, I keep it really simple, Roger. I mean, Kingsley's mentioned actually these pockets, but I have one which is kind of over my heart, if you like. People put their phones in there, but I often put camera batteries in there to help keep warm. But I think it's been fine. I'm out for it, to be honest. I've been photographing in -10, and battery life has been pretty good. I mean, certainly fairly acceptable. I mean, I've been to Churchill photographing polar bears. Okay, we're inside a van, so when we were moving, the Tundra vehicle was quite warm, but when we stopped to photograph, all the windows were open and bitterly cold. And the batteries, for me, lasted several hundred shots, no problem at all. So long as you've got good, batteries that are in good condition. Perhaps a genuine thing, I suppose, a third party may be. So I know it's tempting to save money in buying third party, but maybe they don't have the life of the genuine article, and that's worth considering.
Okay, good. Well, that's great, and I think there's some good useful tips there. Hopefully that will help guide you a little bit with your cold weather photography. Do take care. Obviously it can be slippy and a bit dangerous out there, so do take care if you're out taking pictures. Go on, Kingsley. Are you going to tell us a slipping or falling over story now?
No, I was just going to say I've just slipped over. It's really bad. I was going to be a bit of a bore and talk about this, like you mentioned the safety aspects, and like so whether you're going out on your own or with someone else, like it's always preferable to overpack with warm clothing, and sort of let people know where you are. And like something we're very, I know, like we tend to be a little bit more kind of landscape and nature photography kind of based, but if you're going out and doing sort of portraits or something, then it's sort of about thinking about making sure that your subject is comfortable as well, and kind of packing hot drinks and extra clothing for them.
Yeah, I'm sure that Will has got a hip flask, right?
Well, I've got several, but sorry, I always forget that. Well, alcohol, of course, is not good for you because it enhances heat loss. But that said, when in Lofoten I was doing the Northern Lights, I did have the hippie handy. I wasn't worried about heat loss because we're going to get back into a nice warm car afterwards. But it's not like generally.
So I was criticised by some outdoor people for kind of for that sort of hip flask thing once, and then I was reminded of the kind of the St Bernard with the drum of brandy, which must be like, I guess basically that is just sort of like 18th, 19th, 18th century sort of thinking that like, well, if you've had a drink, you'll probably be all right, isn't it?
So you don't have your dogs walking around at home with a small wooden barrel underneath their chins?
Do you know what?
Disappointed.
What a brilliant idea!
Get on it immediately. We shall move on to some reader questions. First one comes from a chap called Bob Smart, who emailed in after listening to our last podcast, and he said, "I'm currently a D850 user and want to make the switch to mirrorless, but can't decide between the Z7 Mark II and the Z9. What does the team think are the defining differences?" Now, presumably, apart from the fact that one costs a couple of £1,000 more than the other. Kingsley, I'm going to come to you because you're very similar to Bob. Well, I think you both are actually. D850 user, looking to switch to mirrorless. You've actually got a Z7 Mark II.
Yeah.
So What
Yeah.
are the defining differences? What reasons would he have to go for the Z7 Mark II or the Z9?
Well, like, I suppose it's a horses for courses thing, isn't it? It's like for a long time the Z7 and the Z7 II were top of Nikon's mirrorless range, and now they're not. And the camera that's replaced them at the top is basically a professional workhorse, and has all the features sort of that. And like it's I mean, arguably it's primarily aimed at sports and action photographers and news people, who sort of demand the tip top performance and kind of rugged build and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, like it would come down to what Bob's using the camera for. I certainly found that I've enjoyed the Z7 II being a bit smaller and lighter than the D850, and also this weekend just gone I was using the Nikon Z 14 to 30 f4, the sort of the smaller of the two wide angle zooms in that range, and like it's an incredibly sort of small and light package. Sort of, and I suppose the kind of the comparable version of that would have been the D850 and the 16 to 35 f4, which I don't have the numbers, but I'd imagine it probably weighs a kilogram more, which is significant if you are going on a yomp.
Okay, so you're basically saying that the defining differences are, if Bob wants a smaller, lighter kit, then the Z7 Mark II is probably the right choice. And also, if he wants a rugged pro spec camera, then maybe that the Z9 takes the nod. Would you say that's pretty much it?
Yeah, I mean, like and there are things that kind of like people. So I myself will have mentioned that the fact that the EVF is way superior on the Z9. I would love one. I hope to get one if I can afford it eventually. And the frame rate and everything, but it's one of those kind of super performing cameras, and you are in danger of over specking to an extent. And I was shooting, like I said, pictures of my dog running around on the beach this weekend, and through using the Z7 II more and more, I can get 99% of those pictures sharp, and it's a large dog moving at some pace on a long lens, and it's about using it properly. Like it can't compete with the Z9, but if you use it properly, it works brilliantly. So it's a like in many ways when the Z7 came out, everyone called it a mirrorless D850, and in a lot of ways it is. So
right,
it's it's a good replacement.
Okay, Will, anything to add?
I think it's covered it all off, but I mean, well, firstly, Bob's a lucky chap being able to have the choice between the two. But of course, one big thing about the cameras for me, I mean, I know the Nikon Z9 has got electronic shutter only and the most intelligent AF ever in a Nikon camera, but it's also got a deep body to it, and that's something that needs to be considered, because the thing about the Z7, if you had a bad battery pack to the Z7 or Z7 II, yes, it becomes the size of the Z9. But the point is, you can take the thing off. So when you want to travel light, it's much more of an easier proposition to take about. So it depends on what Bob wants to shoot. I mean, if he's wanting to shoot super duper fast action and he wants a track focus with a long lens, then there is only one choice, and that is the Z9. But if he just wants to do landscape, a few portraits, a bit of general photography, bit of street, no question, get the Z7 II. It just makes more sense. And the couple of grand you save, of course, you can put towards some nice glass to go on the front of it. So I mean, Bob's got in an enviable position, but assuming he's not shooting press type pictures, to me, there's only one choice. Or of course, the other thing you could do is wait for the much rumored Z8, which could be the high resolution Nikon to come, maybe.
Okay,
just start that rumor going.
Good stuff. All right. Well, there you go, Bob. Hopefully that you've got an answer there. I think you can pick out the detail from that. So, Will, I'm going to come straight back to you on the next one, which comes from H. Selena via email. Don't know the first name. I've been taking pictures for about 2 years and now have so many that I need to empty my computer's hard drive and copy them somewhere else. I'm considering saving all of my images in the cloud rather than on a separate drive. Do you think that's a good idea? Now, Will, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, and you had what sounded like an extremely sensible suggestion. So why don't you explain that?
Well, I just want, well, first thing to say to H is, you've only been taking pictures for 2 years, but you never have your pictures just in one place anyway. So if they're on your computer's hard drive, well, get them off there and get them copied, because you should have at least 2 copies and preferably 3 copies of pictures if you possibly can. So you could have, for instance, you could have your pictures on the computer, fine, if you've got enough space, but then have an external drive where you've got copies of them. And what you could do is have copies again on another external drive. If you can, keep them off site.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, here I'm in London at the moment, so I've got some pictures with Annie here on a 8 terabyte drive. So I know that if something happens back home, I've always got some pictures somewhere. So that's the first thing to say to H is, one, don't keep them in one place, and I'd encourage him or her to have an external drive. And they're not that expensive. I mean, we've just had Black Friday, and I bought another 8 terabyte drive, and it's about 150 quid. But you don't have to buy anything that big. If it's only been photographing for 2 years, it's probably only got a couple of terabytes worth of pictures, if that. So buy one of these portable drives, they're 60, 50 quid, whatever they are, and just, store them on that. So, I mean, that's one view. And the other view, of course, is that you can keep them online, but I certainly wouldn't keep all my pictures online, because it's just so difficult getting them up there. It takes ages, and managing them is an issue. And I have an Amazon Prime account, and there you can store all your still images. I think the limit on video is 5 gigabytes, but on stills, you can put everything up there. But I wouldn't dream of putting all my stuff up there, because it would just be, well, tedious for one, and also managing them is something else. But, I would just, my simple advice, if he wants or she wants to go online with his storage, pick your very, very best pictures, the ones that emotionally mean more to you than anything else, or potential award winners, and just get them up online, be it on Amazon, be it on Google, be it on Adobe. They're endless, and he may have a web server that offers free storage. There are many ways of storing stuff online, but I wouldn't put my whole archive online. I've got about 12 terabytes worth of images, and you know what, my my RAID crashed recently, and I've had to reload it. So I've had to take lots of stuff off it, and I'm now putting stuff on it. It takes days, and I certainly wouldn't, I wouldn't put all that stuff online. It just takes too long.
Sure. Okay. Great. Kingsley, anything to add? Are you a cloud fan?
I'd go along with what Will said, but I mean, I guess it depends. Basically, if you're in some metropolis and you're getting kind of these amazing broadband speeds, then maybe you think differently. But I don't think I'd trust it to kind of. It's a good backup though, isn't it? I mean, it's a good kind of, like it's the equivalent of an off-site backup. Like I probably said before, but I like once every 6 months I sort of mirror my drive and I give it to a friend to stick in his loft. So like, and I guess if the meteorite hits our town, then we're not going to care too much. So but yeah, like, I mean, and partly I suppose one thing I would say is, if having sort of only been shooting for a couple of years, like unless they've been shooting a lot in those 2 years, sort of now's the time to be a little bit more disciplined in what you throw away, like the stuff that you don't keep. Like I would, and this is kind of fairly easy to kind of come up with yourself, I suppose, but like I would, you never throw away holiday snaps and little things you've taken of family and trips and Christmas and whatever else. If like me, you have 20 different versions of every scene you've ever shot, that's the point at which you can probably go like, well, I could do without 80% of these. But like I went down a folder the other day because I was looking for an old, in fact, it's something to do with the PN advent calendar, because someone said, do you have any pictures of you with old cameras and stuff? So I went and looked down this folder, and there were like loads of pictures that I'd completely forgotten about, like funny family things and stuff. So like that is the stuff that you really need to be very kind of careful about not losing.
Absolutely. So there you go. Hopefully that's a useful answer to you. So not necessarily putting all of your eggs in one cloud-based basket, and instead still keeping some local storage. But whatever you do, make sure you get them off your computer hard drive and at least one copy made. Okay. So last question comes from a chap called Jack Ash, and he says, some lovely Christmas lights have gone up in my local town, and I'd like to have a go at photographing them. Can you give me any useful tips? Kingsley, you live in a small town, or a lot. I've called it small twice now. That's never, isn't it? You live in a town.
Yeah, small town, big ideas, Rog.
Small town, big ideas. So why don't you start? Because I would imagine your place looks very picturesque with Christmas lights and what have you. What would you do if you were going out to photograph those lights?
I suppose it's the similar thing to talking about the snow stuff, isn't it? It's the way different seasonality affects scenes and kind of puts a new perspective on them. And you can arguably just kind of go to the places that work pretty well and kind of have a shot there. I guess like I particularly like with Christmas lights, I quite like using sort of shallow depth of field and getting quite close to them to frame other things, so and I guess and if you've got family around and you're shooting kind of wintry Christmassy portraits, that's quite a good kind of opportunity there as well. I mean, equally, if you can get up high, sometimes that works. Like certainly there are church towers around here that the sort of the local, what do you call them, people that run churches,
churchists,
vicars, I don't know, they're quite happy to let you if you ask nicely, they're quite happy, make a donation. They're quite happy to let you scurry up their church town occasionally to do those sort of things. I guess equally, it's if it's safe to do so, it's a nice time to get the drone out. If you've got access to a drone, you can do some sort of interesting stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of it's working out what appeals to you normally and then trying to fit those lights into it, isn't it?
So given that you've previously mentioned that you're a bit of a fan of a traffic trail, is it an opportunity to pick a road going through the town, get the lights around it, bit of a traffic trail, tripod down by the side of the road, etc.?
I don't know. Is that I'm sort of, I don't know, is that a bit too much light? I'm not sure. Do you know what I like this time of year is shooting shop fronts. That's nice if you kind of go around with particularly if you go around with a sort of 35mm or something, and you get that kind of glow, get it at the right time of day where you're kind of mixing the artificial light is just getting a little bit stronger than the kind of natural light maybe, and you're kind of mixing it up a little bit. That's quite fun, and you kind of get that sort of nice glowing cozy look.
Will, you've got stuff to add.
I just want to take issue with Kingsley. I can't believe he suggested to use a drone to photograph Christmas lights. Good God, man. I can imagine there'd be drones in trees and hung up wires across the street all around the UK. That's a terrible bit of advice, Kingsley, in my view. And of course,
don't worry, we'll take it out in the edit.
Yeah, edit that. That's terrible. I certainly say to Jack would take a tripod and shoot. You don't have to shoot at high ISOs, but take a tripod and get more of the because the thing is, if you expose for the lights themselves, you don't get much detail in the background, and I think you need a bit more overexposure to get some detail around the lights, because you can get away with murder nowadays. But I would certainly try different things. I would like to try zoom bursts, and that is where you open the shutter, keep the shutter open while you operate the zoom of your lens. You can either zoom into the scene or you can zoom out. The effects are different. So I'll certainly try zoom bursts. I would also, as well, if you've got them, use a star filter or make your own star filter with some petroleum jelly on a skylight filter.
Hang on. I'm being hung up here for suggesting a drone thing, and then and now I'm getting zoom bursts and star filters.
In Will's defence, it's not likely to cause injury to anybody other than the photographic gods who may wreak havoc on them. But
I would rejoin to that the conscientious drone pilot never causes any danger, for which the fraternity that I'm in.
Well, I've no doubt there are. I'm not saying drone flies are irresponsible, but they are annoying to people underneath. And I was up my local hall recently photographing the sunset when the drone zipped past, And I wish I had an air gun because I would love to have taken that out. But that aside, I'm just thinking about the health and safety of your own drone in flying it at night, and what would be the point? Because I'm not sure what good pictures you'd get, but maybe that's just me. You can have fun without a drone by being ground based. And I would say to Jack, by all means, photograph the lights, but then try stuff like zoom bursts, try multiple exposures as well. I mean, most cameras now let you do multiple exposures. So you shoot one with the lights in perfect focus, and then you defocus and photograph your second image, and you get some nice halo effect. So I think there's certainly some pictures to be had. And perhaps if you get your act together, Jack, go shoot some pictures now, and then get them printed using one of these photo services. You'll get your pictures on a festive card of your own. So rather than buy these mass-produced Christmas cards, make your own for some of the pictures you've taken recently, and make a thing of it. I think it's a great thing to do.
Well, who knew that a simple, humble question about Christmas lights would have created such animosity between between the pair of you? So let's speedily try and wrap this podcast up by ending, as we always do, with a Will's word of wisdom, which presumably Kingsley will take immediate umbrage to.
Can't wait.
So Will, regale us with your word of wisdom to round out this time round.
Well, I think this feature is not available on drones at the moment, but maybe Kingsley will correct me. But I was going to suggest our listeners use aspect ratios for a bit of fun, either to hone their compositions or to just try different things. And I was shooting some landscapes recently, and I had the aspect ratio feature assigned to a function button, so I could quickly zip through different compositions, because I've been rather enjoying shooting 16:9 format pictures. So, and that's on a medium format camera, and that's why I was doing it. So you can do that, and you can just basically explore different compositions because obviously it's easy to do once you're back home at the in front of the computer. But trying it on site is something which is interesting. Actually, it makes you think about your composition far more. So I had the camera on the tripod, as I say, the aspect ratio set to a function button, and I was just trying different compositions. I was trying panoramic, trying square, trying 16:9, and the default 4:3, and just having a bit of fun. And the camera I was using it on a Fujifilm. And also, speaking of Fujifilm, I've just been testing the XT30 Mark II, which is a relatively entry-level, mid-level camera, and that features are available on that. And the beauty of it is, I found that you can shoot with this aspect ratio engaged, and I shoot JPEG and RAW, and the RAWs are still full frame, full size afterwards. So if you shot square pictures and your JPEGs are square, your RAWs are still fine, so you can still crop afterwards. Now that might not apply to every camera brand, so you do have to check this. And if you are shooting square and your camera only gives you square RAWs at the end of it, for instance, then yeah, by all means, you need to make sure that you've got all the compositions covered, and you may have to shoot full frame, full format afterwards to make sure you got your options catered for. But give it a go. I found it a great experience, and
it is good. I have to agree. I did go through a period of time where I shot everything square, and it was kind of it's also very Instagram friendly if you do that. But yeah, it is a really good discipline, and actually from a compositional perspective, it really does make for some good images. Kingsley, no doubt. Let's give you the opportunity to completely disagree, or are you on board with this particular word of wisdom?
I don't agree with any of that at all, Rog. Stick to a good British 3:2. That's what I say, or a 4:3 if you've got a Micro Four Thirds. No, of course I completely agree that you should mix up your aspect ratio depending on the subject you're shooting.
Excellent. Well, we shall wrap up there before there is any more disagreement. So that just leaves me to say thank you to hand warmer fanboy and drone disliker Will Chung. Thanks, Will.
I'm not a drone disliker, Roger. You got me wrong. It's in the arena of Christmas light photography. I don't think it works.
Oh, I see.
So don't get me wrong, drone users everywhere. A pleasure as always, Roger and Kingsley, and to our listeners. We'll see you again next time.
Indeed. And thank you also to Star Trail and Advent Canada hater and Will Chung naysayer, Mr. Kingsley Singleton. Thank you, Kingsley.
Thanks. That was cathartic, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's just taken out all the angst that has been created from your 4 or 5 hour drive back from Devon, I think. Well done. Excellent. Well, thanks very much, chaps. And thank you also for listening. And we'll speak to you again before too long. Cheers.